Good morning and welcome to the who are we? The Cyber Agony Uncles
Yeah.
uh, for June. I'm Stephen Ridgway.
And I'm Rich Benfield. Good afternoon. Morning. I've not started well.
Yeah, if this wasn't live, we'd re-record this, wouldn't we?
Oh, absolutely. Still,
Yeah,
never
never mind.
mind.
So you get the real us, regardless. Oh no! Talking of which, by the way, I may end up on mute a little bit, Rich. You may have to end up doing a bit more of the talking than like on my behalf, because I was talking to you earlier, like post-COVID plus heart meds has left me with a nasty cough. So if I go on mute, that's because I've just like disintegrated into a coughing fit. But hopefully that won't happen. It won't disturb us too much. So, Rich, what's the question for this month?
So, this month's question is a great one. And it reads as follows. I work at a large company with a substantial security operations center. That's a SOC. Recently, there's been a lot of talk about moving the SOC offshore and also replacing our level 1 SOC roles with AI. Management is saying this is a good thing for the company, but I'm seriously concerned. Although my role isn't directly affected, I work closely with the SOC and I can already see the problems coming. I've voiced my opinion that the quality of service will decline significantly, and for saying that, someone actually called me racist. For the record, I've worked with outsourced teams in India before. They were professional and capable, but there were real issues with understanding our internal processes and cultural nuances. They often took instructions literally, which caused delays and confusion. I understand that cost savings are important and that the bottom line is a major factor here. But I genuinely believe that this move could backfire and ultimately hurt the company, including the bottom line they're so focused on. Am I overreacting, or is this a disaster in the making? So that's an interesting one. Oh, Stephen, your mic's dropped out. So yeah,
Am I back?
yes, you
Yay!
are. You're back.
There we go.
Wonderful.
Superb. Superb. Yeah, I mean that is a very interesting one. I think there are many things in that short question that we kind of have to delve into. But I suppose the first one, I guess, will be how appropriate is it to replace level 1 SOC with AI? And I suppose there's also then a question around how's the decision been made, and is decision making in this organization based on good information and a proper understanding of proper risk assessment, understanding of the change in risk posture. Yeah, as for being called a racist, well, you get called a racist for getting out of bed these days. So I wouldn't be unduly worried about that. I mean, if that means in your organisation that's going to be a problem, then you're probably better off changing organisations anyway. So that I don't think is too much of a worry. There is, I mean, in my experience. Outsourcing services to India can be very successful, and it can be very um, cost effective, but there are hidden costs associated with managing the outsourced service, which I've never seen any organisation, none that I've worked in or none that I've supported over the years, that have done this. I've never seen those costs being evaluated as part of the decision in order to move the service. They come later, normally as oh, right, so you mean we're going to actually have to send people to India to get this working right? And oh, you mean, we're now going to have an extra tier of management somewhere that looks after all this stuff. So there are hidden costs, but if you understand the fact that it's not as easy getting an offshored service with people involved. It's not as easy to get an offshore service working as well as an onshore service without putting in extra effort. If you know that, then that's fine. If that's a conscious decision, then there are savings to be had. You just can't take like the first figures that get bandied around as being, well, that's what it's going to cost, therefore we bank the rest in savings. Is my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, India's got a reputation for having lots of skills and qualifications and certified people in technology. So you'd think that, or you'd hope that outsourcing to India for cybersecurity wouldn't necessarily be too challenging. You should be able to find a partner out there that specializes in this stuff. But then it's, of course, a case of integrating them into your workflows, how you operate as a business, and then there's the cultural fit element as well. But so yes, whilst it does pose certain challenges, I would agree. It can be a very productive relationship with a cybersecurity out there.
Yeah, I mean, also there's something that I've noticed over the last 10 years is that um, the top, well, yeah, kind of like the top line costs have moved very significantly um, over the last 10 years or so. So whilst there are savings still, very substantial savings, at least in theory, still to be had, you're not necessarily getting the top tier people. The top tier people in India are paid comparable rates to rates you would find in other parts, other parts of certainly Europe and places like that. It's if you to get the best people, you still have to pay quite a decent wage for them. But there is a lot of churn. I've been involved in services where the people that you deal with on a day-to-day basis have got quite a high rate of turnover, mainly because the market, the job market, has moved from being low paid through to being quite reasonably paid, and most of that has been done by people taking the next job. Or kind of like, there was this joke a few years ago about, well, if you're working with anybody good, find out what company works across the road from the people that you're getting the service from, because you can bet your bottom dollar that if you want to keep on working with this particular person, that's where they're going to be next week, but on a bigger salary. So well, it's slightly facetious, but there's a certain amount of truth in that. Certainly the turnover of good people is quite high. But actually, I think that's only fair because, really, if you're looking at the UK and you've got good people, you would expect to pay them a reasonable amount. So why would you not expect to pay them a reasonable amount somewhere else? So I've only
Yeah,
seen that affecting organisations that have ended up with very good people at what they think is an absolute bargain price, and then realise that they can't keep those people. The service provider can't keep those people.
yeah, that's it. So combining that with the idea of dropping the level one SOC analysts and replacing them with AI, um, that to me sounds fairly scary. I mean, I like to change one thing and measure the result before going on to a further change where possible. I tend to feel like that's maybe a slightly more scientific approach, whereas this company is proposing to change two things at once in one fell swoop. And that to me does sound disruptive.
I think that as a general point, um, being realistic about the amount of successful change that's deliverable is very important. I've seen many projects over the years that have uh, not had a view on what's realistically deliverable in the way of benefits, and have waded in trying to do vast amounts of things. Early in my career, I've done that. Sometimes found myself working ridiculous hours with teams of incredibly good people, which we were basically just burning out because we'd all gone, oh yeah, we can do that. But the reality was it was damn sight harder than you'd think it would be. And something like this is also cross-departmental. So, I mean, security within an organisation touches all of the organisation one way or another. So, and a part of the transformation that is often underestimated is the time and effort required to make sure that the transformed service brings the rest of the business along with them. Are all the current existing processes and procedures going to actually translate to an offshore supplier using AI rather than people in order to deliver this stuff? Now, if they've been through this, what we don't know from the question is what's the due diligence that's been done at a managerial kind of board level? Who's making the decisions and how have they come to those conclusions? Because they may have actually got a really good answer to this, and it may be known already that it works, and the person who's put the question in has just not been well informed about how this is going to work and the decision process that has ended up there. I suspect in reality it probably hasn't been a well-informed decision, but that's just a gut feeling. We don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I still, despite being a fairly regular but somewhat casual user of AI, I still have reservations about its place in the SOC. I've not seen any SIEM tools that utilize AI effectively, and I know everybody's racing in the security world. I know that everybody's racing to latch onto the AI buzzword and develop AI based tooling, but I've not come across anything yet that really can replace human intelligence on a SOC.
Are you trying to tell me that machine learning and SOAR haven't already solved all these problems and made AI unnecessary?
Ah, now that's a sore subject, isn't it? If you excuse the pun.
Yeah,
SOAR
I mean,
never, yeah.
every few years we get some buzzwords that are going to result in there being no need for people. AI isn't it. It has its place, I think, and certainly there's scope for using AI to look for things which humans struggle to pick out. So looking for anomalies in large data sets, for example. It doesn't have to be AI that does that, but computers are better at doing that sort of stuff than humans are, perhaps. But the decisions around what do you do about it, I don't know. Some stuff you need to be able to think of the process that you want to follow in order to have any hope that a computer will think of the process that it should be followed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I think of alerting in the SOC and detection rules and things like that, I I don't think it actually needs AI at that point. I feel like if you have good solid detection engineers writing good high quality rules, you're going to capture nearly everything. The anomaly detection piece is actually quite interesting because that is harder to capture and harder to spot. And that's where you do want to have something chunking through swathes of data, hundreds of millions of records coming in every day in these SIEMs. So yeah, absolutely. There might be room for it, but then that's great for flagging up stuff. But as you say, what happens after that? What are the actions that need to be taken after that? Will an AI, given their propensity to hallucinate, just in regular daily use, will an AI actually know the right thing to do? Will it flag the right information? There should, in my mind, there should still be a human element. Now, it might be that I know every SOC's built differently. They will have different processes. It might be that that stuff then gets punted up to a level 2 analyst. In which case, really, have you got a level 2 analyst doing level 2 analyst work?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. It's the trouble is you end up in the realms of philosophy as much as you do cybersecurity with some of this stuff. But I think that there's um, right now. I think that there is scope for using AI in targeted ways. I think it can make good recommendations around uh, tuning alerts. So we
Yeah.
still suffer, I think, in the industry from alert fatigue, and I am glad I'm not a level one SOC doing this sort of stuff because it's a very hard job, and they do a job of it generally have. But I think there is scope for AI to go through 10,000 things and say, well, okay, given the information I know about that, the technology and the business, you know, 9,999 of those things we know are so unlikely to be an actual compromise that we earth on them. But one of those things actually needs proper triage. That's fine. I wouldn't necessarily want it to be making those decisions autonomously and then giving somebody else the one to triage. But what I think would be interesting would be effectively write a report saying you can improve your, as it were, reduce the number of unnecessary alerts. They're not false positives, they're just by a large percentage by tuning things in this particular way. Um, uh, the remainder are things that then still need somebody who knows what they're doing dealing with it, and then humans, look at that and go, well, okay, yeah, I agree that that does make sense. And you can apply because there's logic you can apply to it. Like if you see a particular alert coming through, I mean, if you ask yourself the question, looking at this alert, could I be looking as an indicator of compromise? And if the answer to that is yes, then it's a good alert. So you look at it and you go, oh yeah, okay, this could well be a starting point for a proper investigation. If you look at it and go, well, you just can't tell from this particular alert. You just can't tell. One of the sorts of alerts that people get that fall into that category are often things like log-on events. So, okay, an administrator's logged on. By itself, is that an indicator of compromise? Well, probably not. The vast majority of times, it will just be a service account or whatever that is doing its job. So should it be an alert? Well, it probably shouldn't. But is it useful information if you know that you're in the middle of an incident? Oh, yeah, it is useful information because, for a scenario, your service account has been compromised and is under the control of an attacker. Knowing where that service account has logged on and what it's done is really useful. So that's the sort of thing where it might be better to have that as a log rather than an alert. We can use stuff like AI to help make recommendations around that sort of decision. Should I see this as an alert or not? I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the other issue with AI is you're not going to want to use a public AI for this, via an API, because that would be a bad move in terms of your data security. Pushing all of your weakest points through a public facing platform. So you're going to need to train your own AI. And AI takes millions upon millions of iterative steps before it starts to become useful. A lot of our SOCs a lot of our SIEMs are ingesting 300 million odd rows of data per day. It's for a reasonable size SIEM, that's completely normal. And even that level of data isn't enough to train an AI model quickly. There's an old tale about somebody training an AI model to play a computer game, which was a typical car racing game. Apparently, it took the AI 2 days to learn how to move forward, let alone steer. And then several days later, it learned how to get round the first corner. And then eventually, a month later, it's learned how to drive one particular track. And then you put it on a different track, and it has to learn everything all over again, pretty much. And so
what you find out though is that once it has learned, it probably beats you on that.
oh, probably, yeah. So
And that's
a decent,
I think that's the point, isn't it?
yeah. So it's going to take time, and if you're outsourcing to a company out in India, dropping AI in straight away as your level 1 SOC. So you're starting a service with level 2 and above SOC analysts, and essentially a blank, slightly dumb AI model. You're going to be flooding your level 2 analysts because the AI is just not going to know what it's doing, probably for at least the first 3 months.
We're making an assumption here that AI model for this particular, as is run by the.
Oh, sorry, Stephen. Looks like your mic cut out a sec there.
Am I back? I'm not having
Yes,
a
you
good
are.
time with the mic today. Yeah, okay. We're making an assumption that it is a dedicated instance for this company. I would think that would be, from a service provider perspective, I could see there being lots of pressure to not do that, and to have a generic AI model. And those are good questions. In fact, are they using GPT? Are they, just the generic GPTs out? The sort of thing. How are they doing it? We've got to make the assumption that those risk assessments have been done. But you've also got to bear in mind that although cybersecurity and SOC services, SIEM platforms, are not setting out to capture PII, in practice, they capture information which would be covered by GDPR or these days, because you are capturing IP addresses and you are potentially capturing usernames. You could identify an individual from bits of information that might get swept up into a SIEM. In which case, there are regulatory questions around what happens to that data once it's given to an AI model.
Yeah, this is it. And if the AI model is effectively multi-tenanted, because that's realistically going to be the easiest way to train an AI model with a huge amount of data across multiple customers in an outsourced SOC environment, then you've got this added risk of data bleed through. So the AI model might turn around and say, well, this matches this that I've seen elsewhere, and this customer had this, and all of a sudden, yeah, you've lowered your barrier to data segregation, which is a bad thing. I mean, obviously,
absolutely.
It's one of the reasons why we do it differently. And sorry, this isn't an advert or anything, but all our customers, their SIEMs are entirely separate. We don't allow the risk of any data to bleed through because it's universally accepted that that's a bad thing. And the AI suddenly if it is central or multi-tenanted effectively, it opens up that risk.
Yeah, but the other side of it is if it isn't, then you've got multiple instances brain, which means that you're starting from scratch every single time. I could see that if an organisation is winning services on cost, that's not a natural delivery method for this, kind of in contradiction to the pile them high, sell them cheap type approach.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, but it's certainly something to be cognizant of going into that sort of agreement with that company. So, yeah, I mean, going back to the original question, the poster says they genuinely believe that this move could backfire or ultimately hurt the company, including the bottom line they're so focused on. I believe it could backfire. It sounds like a bumpy road to start with, certainly.
Yeah, it could do. The other side of it, though, is at some level in the organisation, somebody is paid to make these decisions.
Yeah.
They may not always make good decisions. I've made some really stupid decisions over the years. Hopefully I've learned from them and I don't make them again. But we've all done it. Even the very best people have made bad decisions because you're making decisions based on the time, and often making a decision is better than procrastinating. Well, we don't know anything about the background that's led up to this, so it is fair to say that cybersecurity is not the core business, is not the raison d'etre of most organisations in the world. There are us, we're providers, so it is. This is we do it. But most other organisations are doing something else. They're making widgets. They're in retail, they water around from one part of the country to another. You know what I mean? It's like they do something else. They're not cyber businesses. In which case, looking to manage your costs in cyber is a perfectly reasonable thing to do. And there are if you're looking at questions around, do I need to build out a large internal team of people that are doing a function, and then work out A, how to recruit them, B, how to motivate them, and C, how to retain them and D, train them, and all of these other things. Am I better doing it that way, or am I better looking for a service? So we don't know what for all we know, they could be in financial trouble and looking to save money they can, or they may not. It may just be natural consolidation. Don't know, but somebody somewhere has made a decision. Now, if this person sees that as a bad decision, it could be because it's a bad decision, or it could be because the person who's posted the question hasn't been party to the discussions that have resulted in this being the outcome and aren't aware about the checks and balances that have been built in. So I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying that unless they were in the committee that made the recommendation, or they sat in the exco or on the board where the decision was actually made to move in this particular direction, and that decision-making process may make perfect sense when looked at through a different lens. We do run the risk of in cyber of only looking at things through a cyber lens. And we talk a lot. You and I, Richard, we've spoken a lot about this. Understanding things from a business risk perspective is more important than trying to enforce the cyber risk view on people who don't necessarily get it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, I'm not seeing many indicators that it's going to be the disaster that the person who raised this question thinks it will be. But then again, we haven't got any of the sort of underlying context around this. But I personally would recommend that this person tries to remain optimistic about it. And sometimes in life, somebody makes a decision that you're not a part of, and you support it and go with it, and then you focus on mopping up the residual mess, and that might be the way to go. And there might not even be any mess. But as with all change, it's all about how it's managed.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's a very, very important concept behind all of that, and that's disagree and commit. Broadly, if you put a bunch of clever people into a room and say how we're going to do X, you're going to get as many solutions to delivering X as there are people in the room. Somehow you've got to get all those people to work together in order to make something work. To a large extent, so long as the solution that's chosen isn't completely bloody stupid, it doesn't matter whether it's the best or not the best solution. What matters is whether the team pull together and deliver it. Now, if it was your idea and it's chosen, okay, you then need everybody else behind you, because all of these things are interdepartmental. All of these things require collaboration across the organisation. Anything to do with fiber or whatever, touches pretty much everybody in the organization. You need support in delivering what you're doing. So if you've got the concepts of disagree and commit, even if people don't think that this is the right thing to, but they'll commit to helping, trying their best to make it work. That's what you need. Because the other way around might be that actually the next decision might go in their way, might go their way. So from the point of view of somebody who disagrees, well, unless you're always going to be the contrarian and always going to say, well, I disagree with any decision anybody's ever come up with, some of these decisions will go in your favor. And what you don't want is for a bunch of other contrarians to walk out of the room having said, yes, okay, that's what we'll do, and immediately go to the coffee machine and start thinking up and discussing ways in which they'll make it fail. And that is incredibly common. The subtle undermining of otherwise viable approaches to things, and it absolutely has to be stamped out through good, well, through good leadership and good management, really, but through understanding how to get a team motivated. Not all decisions go your way. This decision hasn't gone the way that this particular person wanted it to go. Okay. It is, though, the decision that their business has taken, and whilst that is the plan of record, they are obliged, morally and I'm saying through employment contract, they're obliged to do their best to make it work. If it doesn't work, what you then don't want is the blame game. You want the unemotional wash up. Okay, what have we learned from this? How could we avoid ever getting into this situation again? So there's a lot of sort of good team behavior and team theory that sits behind how you deal with these sorts of situations. And it's stuff that it's stuff that you and I, Rich, we work on these things endlessly day in and day out with our teams.
Oh yeah.
I've seen it done well in organizations. I've also seen most of the time it's done really badly. Most of the time, rather if you know you're not going to win the fight in the room, you start a guerrilla out of the room, try and prevent the people who won the argument from actually being able to deliver the benefit. It's part of the shitty politics of that'll probably get us demonetized, but it is part of the poor politics of most organizations.
There you go. I think that's the answer. Disagree and commit. This person's already disagreed, and now it's time to commit.
Yep, might learn something. might be good. Might be an unmitigated disaster. But either way, you're going to walk out of that particular situation armed with a whole load of stuff that you can use in the future. Sometimes it's worth following through on a disaster. Well, it's not worth being, carrying the can for it, but it's sometimes even if you see things that are going to go horribly wrong, actually being involved in them isn't a bad thing, because you can then walk away from it going, okay, I can now see that at this point we made this decision, and that had a chain effect that resulted in all of this stuff failed to work. Make the same mistake again.
Perfect. And I think that answers the question.
I think that's as good as we're going to get. So thank you all for tuning in, as they used to say. And we will speak to you all again next month. Cheerio.
Cheers. Bye-bye.